import in terms of how it, portrays how we work, really. And if you ask people in any survey of their favourite moments of television, the last 30 years or whatever, it's usually a news event and a comedy. It's Del Boy falling through the bar thing, or it's usually comedies are right up there. So comedy's quite important to the our collective cultural identity. I didn't say all that to them, but I probably just swore back at them. But anyway, it was fine. It was fine.
They landed.
Yeah.
The other issue that arose across the series of Alan Partridge, you ended up being accused of being a comedy dinosaur for having a studio laughter track.
Yeah. But I mean, depends how pedantic you want to be. First of all, I always used to take issue with the notion of it being called a laughter track, because that implies that I've gone in with a tape full of noises and added enough. It was done in front of an audience. So what you hear is the sound of laughter, and I've always felt that I think there's something good in hearing other people laugh. I mean, what's terrible is if you watch a show where the audience are laughing their heads off at it, and you think, this isn't funny. This sort of dogmatic kind of Taliban-esque principle of it's uncool to hear an audience laughing at something I just don't like the idea of anyone telling us, there's a right way and there's a wrong way to do comedy. There's hundreds of ways,
Although the issue is, as comedy, a lot of TV comedy gets darker and darker, from Alan Partridge through Extras, The Office, The Royal Family, you wouldn't get physical laughter for large parts of that, would you? It wouldn't be embarrassment, but there would be an appalled silence for long sections, which would be quite an odd dynamic, wouldn't it?
Yes, but again, you see, I wonder whether we're in danger of getting a little bit automatic in that as well, and just thinking, well, this is the bit where the scene is of such acute embarrassment that everyone just says horrible things to each other and then looks at each other in appalled silence. And again, it's one way. It's not everything. And I think we're going back to a sort of a healthier mix now. Catherine Tate and Little Britain, no one's protesting there about the fact they've done it in front of an audience.
We talked about your temperament, but you personality, you said dull, I said conventional, but it's interesting. Interesting comparison, I think, with Chris Morris. You've worked with a lot. He, when he was at Channel 4, he interfered with the transmission copy of one of his programs to have a subliminal insult about Michael Gray, then at Channel 4. It's hard to keep track, then at Channel 4, going to the BBC, now to ITV. You would never do something like that, though, would you? You would never go that far.
Probably not. No, I mean, I don't know where I've never sort of pushed myself to the point where I thought, no, I really can't do that. Someone told me, it might be Chris himself, someone told me a story that sort of Chris Upwich was, he went around, this was before he was sort of well known, he was a sort of local radio broadcaster, but he visited a friend who was doing a show in the World Service, and he was standing there in the studio, and he saw a big red button, and he said to the guy, what happens if I push this? And the guy said, please don't, because that will switch everything off, and that whole system kicks in, which means the signal's gone down, and sort of an emergency broadcast kicks in. For whatever you do, don't switch it off. And Chris put his finger on it, and he went, don't. And then Chris went, no, I just don't think I can do that. I think I would sort of...
But what I'm getting at is which is why you're also a producer, I think, is that you have a responsible streak in a way that a lot of performers don't.
I suppose so, but I kind of like... Maybe it's just cowardice, actually, because I actually like getting in place the people who I know probably would go and do it, I think it kind of helps, actually, that I don't seem irresponsible. I think that's kind of useful, really. It means I get given an office at the Beeb and stuff like that. Whereas, in fact, they shouldn't really trust me as far as they can throw me.
On the hour which became the day today on TV, again, you warn in your lectures about analysing comedy too much because it seems to be funny, but the basic joke there, I think, was that whereas TV news saw itself as questioning authority, it actually had this incredible pompous authority itself, which is what you were getting at.
Yes, although it wasn't a sort of manifesto, it's not like the day-to-day was all about bringing down the credibility of all news. I think it was there because we just found at the time the pomposity of news and the big graphics a funny thing to observe and a useful hook on which to hang our visual jokes.
No, but it was verbally very cute. So the attitude they had those special serious voices. So when Chris Morris would read some complete gibberish like headmaster denies using big-faced boy as satellite dish and all the rest of it, but it's delivered with that incredible stern authority.
Well, it's just that thing that it's the only note we had in terms of performance, which was take it seriously. Don't signal that it's a joke, that you know that it's funny. And the more seriously you deliver it, then the funnier it will be, because what would be funny about it is people thinking this feels real, and yet it's complete bollocks.
The headlines tonight: Bottomley refreshed after 3 days on cross, Bransom's clockwork dog crosses Atlantic floor, and sacked chimney sweep pups boss full of mayonnaise.
We decided then not to have a laughter, and not to do it in front of an audience, but to do it absolutely straight, because the sound of an audience laughing would undermine the sort of seriousness. So in a way we were sort of guilty of what we were having a go at the news broadcast for, in that we took it very seriously. We wanted to take it very seriously. We didn't want people to dress it up as a kind of wacky comedy show.
The anchorman that Chris Morris would play picked up, long before anyone else did, I think, on the peculiar aggression with which Jeremy Paxman would say goodnight at the end of Newsnight, but yet he's not Paxman.
It's not bad, because there were elements of Michael Burke on 999 and his sort of concerned voice, and various other. But yes, I suppose, and there was a slight similarity in look, but it was very. Again, we never sat down and said, how would Paxman do this? It was just a sort of tapping into what people perceive as being the trend at the moment in how news was going.
Tomorrow sees the opening of the London Jam Festival, selling pots of jam, some made by celebrities, to raise money for the homeless. With me is one of the organisers, Janet Breen. Janet, thanks for joining us this evening. This must have taken a heck of a lot of organising.
Yes, well, it has actually. To get all the celebrities to contribute their jam has really been quite an operation.
How much of your time did you put into it?
Oh, I would say at least 6 months.
6 months? To raise money for a jam festival? Isn't that rather stupid?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's all in a good cause. It's
Good
for the
cause,
homeless.
yeah, but how much are you going to raise?
Well, we hope to raise at least £1,500.
£1,500? That's a pathetic amount of money. You can raise more money by auctioning dogs.
Are you competitive? I mean, for example, the periods when everyone was saying Ricky Gervais, Stephen Merchant, incredible, The Office, extras, was that difficult for you?
I think what Ricky Gervais has done is make much more mainstream that kind of writing. That sort of darker, slightly more ambitious look at how we behave. So I think it's a good thing. What I think is a bad thing is everyone else thinking that's therefore how we must make our comedy from now on. And I've bumped into them often enough at award ceremonies where
he was winning the awards.
Kind of gone, your turn this time, is it? Yeah. And so it's not a problem. In fact, I think I've done various articles and so on The Office and how it's probably good for us all.
We talked about the producing side a lot, but the other side, the return to performing with Friday night, Saturday night armistice, was that from a frustration of not performing, or?
I don't know. It's probably an element of it. It's that thing of you sort of. Because when I left university, I went straight into comedy, a bit of presenting, but comedy production, and you still, in your sort of late 20s, early 30s, you still have at the back of your head, well, on the back of the envelope, it was meant to be, I'll go to London, do some stand-up and see where that gets me. So there was probably still a sort of a relic of that. Plus, I really enjoy doing stuff in front of an audience. I really enjoy live performing.
Mike Langford is the Shadow Cabinet devolution spokesman. The Tories don't actually have any MPs in Scotland and Wales, but Ancram was chosen because he can do accents. Although his Welsh does get a bit Pakistani. But there is hope for the Tories, because last month in Scotland, someone did take this picture of the Loch Ness Tory, which they claim is Malcolm Rifkin surfacing for air. But experts say it's a clever hoax and it's actually a monster.
Most comedians say the great thing is producers should just let comedians do what they want, give them their head. Now, you said something which was that performers and writers are not necessarily a good judge of what is best for them to do.
I think that's true. It's the same with me. It's I always, when I'm making stuff, I always make sure there are other people around. Maybe I can send them a cut and say, what do you think? Because you go close to it. So it's that thing of wherever you're doing, always just making sure there's some sort of checks and balances around. There's always another set of eyes and ears who can just stand back and say, yeah, well, fine, you're all laughing your heads over that. It is twice as long as it should be. You know, because it's very difficult to go back to something, especially if you've slaved away over it and like cut it. And
the thing of it, when it started, it was a standard thing for critics to say that somehow it was a response to Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister.
It's a sort of
But it was very much so.
Yeah, I had been, for some time I've been thinking about doing a kind of slightly on the hoof, rough and ready, very realistic thing set in Westminster. But it was prompted in the end by my doing a thing for just railing against these top 10 shows. I was doing Britain's best sitcom, and I did a documentary on Westminster, which, you know, I was always a great fan of anyway, and it just reminded me, A, how great it was, but B, how much politics had actually changed since then, in that it wasn't about a minister and his civil servants, it was all about a minister, his advisors, the media, their relationship, and the fact they are controlled by number 10, and you know, the sort of the grammar of politics had changed in the sort of 20 years or so since Westminster. And I met up with Anthony Jay, who, you know, one of the writers of Westminster, who sort of spurred me on and encouraged me to go for it. So it was a sort of direct inspiration, yeah.
The comparison most people made was that Yes Minister, there's a benign secretariat running the country.
Yeah.
It's kind of all pretty conservative, whereas yours presents this malign spin doctor class who are running it. It seems much more aggressive, much more satirical. Now, you've questioned that comparison.
Well, if you look at Westminster, you'll actually see how nihilistic it is, really, in that no one comes out of it very well. It's not like the civil servants there are very benign. They're quite obstreperous and obstructive. It's interesting how unoptimistic it is as a programme, and yet it's disguised under this British sort of we'll just bumble along and somehow get through it all atmosphere, but it's not really, and therefore it's not the exact opposite of the world portrayed in the thick of it. They are related. One's just evolved from the other, really.
So, did you enjoy the show? You were magnificent, darling.
Yeah, should I phone Keith so that I can get his team to watch you bollock me now?
No. Have I got my bollocking face on?
Well,
No, this is my bollocking face.
ooh, crikey, yeah. Thanks for the pot plant, by the way.
What did I send her?
As an office warming.
Oh, Christ, she's a great PA, isn't she, Sam?
Yeah.
She always remembers the little people.
The most startling thing for me watching Yes Minister now is the fact that the party was never specified.
Yes.
We never knew which party he represented. Now that is a huge difference because thick of it is very specifically and angrily Blair's New Labour.
Yes, except again we never say who the party is. But and I remember having this conversation with Anthony Jay saying, my intention had been to say it's a Labour government. You know, in the same way in the West Wing, they say he's a Democrat president. I just thought it'd be more upfront and I remember him saying, no, that's a great mistake, don't do that. And I'm glad I sort of followed that because, yes, it's clear what we're modelling ourselves on, but I do want the show to feel that it's not a sort of point replication of who's in government now, and it's not seen as having a go at one side of politics. It's seen as reflecting how politics generally works, and we can see that with Cameron. We can see how he's taken the book that Blair used in 1997 and said, "Can I have that, please?" We can see how, you know, people who work as it's not as overt as it was. People don't go around happily calling themselves spin doctors anymore, but to them, the likes of Alistair Campbell are great heroes. You know, even if they're Tory spin doctors. You know, the envy, the way he managed to control information and the relationship with the press and the media.
And have you had any political reaction to it? I mean, specifically from Blair's side?
It's a strange sort of thing because the number of sort of journalists and commentators who have said this is a terribly malign, destructive look at politics that is just adding to the general apathy and lack of confidence in, what are fundamentally good people trying to do their best for the country. The number of people who have said that is sort of balanced and slightly outweighed by the number of sort of former junior ministers and advisors, MPs who have come up to me and said, "Oh, it's a lot worse than you can ever imagine. You're onto something."
But although you suggested that, yes, Prime Minister was perhaps more radical than some people think, Margaret Thatcher famously, perhaps notoriously, she acted a sketch out.
Yes, which
With
is a terrible sight to go.
Awful.
I want you to abolish economists.
Abolish economists, Prime Minister.
Yes, abolish economists, and quickly.
All of them, Prime Minister.
Here's all of them.
You couldn't imagine that happening with New Labour, could you? You couldn't imagine them, although I think there was an attempt to involve you in a Labour Party conference.
I wasn't. This was '96, so it was the year before